Hi! In this video, I'm going to show you how you can start contributing to the Sage Monorepo using its development container or dev container for short. And I'm going to show you 3 different ways of starting this dev container. So the first thing to do is actually to fork the Sage Monorepo. So here you can come here, select your account. I've actually already created a fork, so this option is disabled for me. And then you can click on Create Fork. That will then lead you to the page of your fork. And then the first way to start the development container of the Sage Monorepo is to use GitHub Codespace. So come here, select the 3 dots menu, new with options. And then here you can check. So we are going to clone the main branch. And let's just go with an 8-core instance. It's going to take a couple of minutes to start. So yeah, I can give you some tips about GitHub Codespace. So first, you saw different options when it comes to selecting the number of cores. And this depends on your GitHub account. So I have a pro account, which I think costs $4 per month for now. And I believe that if you have a pro account, you have access to the 8-core and 16-core instance. But if you have a GitHub free account, you may have only 2-core and 4-core options. The other thing to consider is that you have a monthly quota, even with a free GitHub account, for using Codespace. So you have a fixed number of hours. It actually depends on the number of CPUs that you are using. So for example, you may use for 180 hours a 1-core instance. Actually, I don't think this exists, but just to give you an example. But then if you select a 2-core instance, then you would burn your quota 2 times faster. And if you use a 4-core instance, then you will burn it 4 times faster, etc. And although this quota is different depending on whether you have a free account or a pro account. By default, if you don't configure anything, I believe that GitHub is going to allow you to use all your quota, your monthly quota. And then once you've reached it, it's going to block you the access to Codespace, unless you do some configuration. And then you will be charged because you're using hours outside of your quota. Don't take my word for it. Please look at the GitHub documentation to make sure that you don't start being charged without you knowing it. And then the other thing is that if you go to this menu and then select your Codespace, here you will see a list of all your Codespaces. So here I have one that is stopped, and I could always I believe click on open in, and then you can select open it in the browser or open it in VS Code. And here you can see that the one we just selected has actually already started. So let's go to it. All right, so here you are in VS Code. Well, it's not VS Code. It's actually I believe an open source alternative to VS Code, but the UI is very similar. And it's running inside your browser. And everything that you are running here, all this command runs on this virtual instance owned by GitHub. So that was the first method to start the dev container. And here at the bottom, you can see Codespaces. So that show you that here you are basically using Codespaces. Now, there is one thing I don't like about this web UI. So one is the port forwarding is not working properly. So that may be fixed in the future, but right now there are still some issues. But another thing is that I like to close my VS Code tab with Command V or Control V on Windows. But if you do that here inside the browser, you're actually going to close the entire tab, which is annoying. So what you can do instead is open Codespace inside VS Code. So the only thing you need is VS Code on your computer, and then go through these few steps. And then here VS Code is starting and it's connecting to your Codespace instance. So everything that you are running here, for example, in the terminal, it's running inside the Codespace instance. All right, so now, as I mentioned, so you have a quota for Codespace, and let's say that you are running out of quota and you don't want to pay. So another option is to actually start the development container on your computer. So here I'm going to stop the Codespace instance. And the nice thing with Codespace is that if you don't use it for more than 1 or 2 hours, it's going to automatically stop and you will no longer be charged. So the second way, so here I'm going to stop here. All right, so back to your fork. So the other option is to start the dev container on your computer. And there is kind of 2 variants of it. So the first one is to start the dev container and then clone your fork inside a Docker volume. And all of that can be done in one action. So you actually don't want to click on this button, because if you do so, you will be cloning the official repository. But if you want to contribute to the Sage Monorepo, you actually want to clone your fork. So what you can do is copy the link, go inside your browser, and here you want to change the URL, and here you want to specify your own username or whatever GitHub account you used to fork the Sage Monorepo, and then press enter. And here again, VS Code is opening. So here you need VS Code installed on your computer, and you need Docker. And you need actually a VS Code extension, which if you don't have installed, probably it's going to ask you to install it. But just to be sure, the extension you need is called dev containers, which I already have. So here is everything starting. The first time it may take longer for you because you will need to download the Docker image, which in my case I already have, so I don't have to do that. And so here you can see at the bottom, so we are inside the dev container. And by the way, the definition of the dev container lives in the folder .devcontainer and then devcontainer.json. And here you can see the Docker image that we are using. And then on top of this Docker image, some VS Code extensions will be installed. So here, all the extensions that you see here inside the dev container, they have been installed automatically based on this extension listed here. And then we have a few ports that are reserved for some project in Sage Monorepo. All right, yeah, so here if you look at remote, so the nice thing is that when you open it that way, it should be already properly configured. And the proper way is to have the remote name origin pointing to your fork and the remote name upstream pointing to the official repository. And then from here, let's say that you want to start contributing to the Sage Monorepo. So there are one thing that you need to do first. So here you have your main branch, which is the main branch of your fork. And you always want to keep that branch synchronized with the main branch of upstream. So what you never want to develop and push commit to this main branch. So you want to keep it the same as the official main branch. And the way you can do so is by fetching changes from upstream and then going to your main branch. So here we are already on it, so that's good. And then you want to do git rebase upstream main. And this is going to make it so that your local main branch has the same content as the official main branch. And now you can create a feature branch, and you can do so with git checkout -b my feature branch or whatever name you want to give to it. And now you can make changes and then push it to your fork. And then to open a pull request, you can simply go to, for example, the official repository. And if you go on that page, you will see a banner that will show, and it will ask you whether you want to open a pull request based on the branch you've recently pushed to your fork, and then just go through the steps, and then you will have then created a pull request. So here I'm actually on my fork page. I think that may work as I described, but otherwise you may want to go to the official repo, and there for sure you will see this banner I just described. All right, so yeah, I showed you how to keep your main branch up to date, and you probably want to do that every day, like each time you want to start a new feature branch, so you want to keep main up to date. Also, if you want to update a feature branch, so you would go to the main branch, update it, and then go back to your feature branch, and then you can simply do git merge main, and that will actually update your feature branch, and then you can push the changes. So that's also something recommended, so that your feature branch is as close to the official main branch as possible. All right, I'm going to try to show you a third variant. So here, as I mentioned, we have all this code that lives inside a Docker volume. And maybe you don't want this code to be in a Docker volume. Maybe you want it to be on your file system. So here what I'm going to do is that I'm going to close the dev container. So you can do that by reopening the folder locally, which is not possible here because yeah, I'm on Windows. It's a bit weird. So I can do git close remote. And here, for example, so you can see I'm on Windows, and here you can see the development container, and I'm actually going to remove it to show you this third way of opening the dev container. And you can also see the volume, and so one of them, I think the Sage Monorepo one, is where the dev container was saved. I'm going to remove it just to be sure, because I had a few issues before, and I think that was because having like two dev containers at the same time doesn't really work really well. So I'm going to remove this one, and this one. I think I could have also used the prun command, but yeah. So here we are good to go. So because I don't like to develop on Windows directly, I like to use VSL or Windows Subsystem Linux. And you can install that from the Microsoft Store. You can select Ubuntu, Debian. I would recommend using Ubuntu for several reasons. One of them is because it's more widely adopted and slightly more secure. But Debian is known to be more stable. Anyway, so here I'm on the Debian instance, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to remove this Sage Monorepo demo, and then I'm going to create it again. And so here we are going to start actually by cloning the fork on your file system, so it's always going to be there. So git clone, select, so here I'm on the official repo, so here I'm back to my fork, code, local, select HTTPS, and then you can click your repo. And then you want to open this folder that you have just cloned in VS Code. So I need to select Sage Monorepo demo, Sage Monorepo. And then finger crossed, because before making this video, I had several issues, but what you can do is, and I don't know how to open this menu from here, but at least on Windows, it's Control-Shift-P, and I believe on Mac, it's Command-Shift-P. But anyway, you want to open folder in container. And then it's going to ask you, do you want to open this folder? So you're going to say yes. And if everything goes well, then the dev container should start. And the only difference compared to before is that now these files are on your file system, while before, if you remember, when you used the link of this button, the repo was actually cloned inside a Docker volume. So it's up to you. If you commit and push your changes to your remote frequently, it shouldn't really matter, whether one day you remove the folder the Docker volume by mistake. But I think that's slightly more secure to have it on your file system. So go to your file system, clone the fork, and then open the dev container. And yeah, make sure that every command you run, even like going to another branch or creating a new branch, make sure you do that when you are inside the dev container, because we are using this Git hooks. Like before every commit, we have some code that automatically run to test the quality of your code and things like that. And so if you try to check out a new branch outside of the dev container because you don't have the proper tool installed, then you're going to have errors. But yeah, so here, if you look at the remote, one last thing, yeah, once again, origin should point to your fork and upstream should point to the official repository. And I've showed you how to keep your main branch of your fork up to date using rebase, and then how to create a feature branch. All right, with all of that, you have several options to start contributing to the Sage Monorepo, whether you want to use GitHub Codespace or use your local computer. The Open Challenges team actually is developing on EC2 instances created with Sage Service Catalog. So that's also definitely an option. And for that, look at the docs folder and then the file develop on a remote instance. And using this instruction, you should be able to create an EC2 and then start using it to contribute to the Sage Monorepo. All right, thank you for watching. Bye.